Welcome to the show. It's IB Countdown to Kickoff, along with Vince D'Addario, Sean Stiers. We get you ready for Notre Dame and Stanford this weekend after Notre Dame's bye week last week. Vince, do you think this bye came at just the right time for the Irish?
I would say if this was the beginning of the season and you said, after game 5, they're going to have a bye, I was like, I don't know, felt a little early.
A little soon.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really have an opinion, I guess, either way, but the way the season has been going and the way the season has gone up to this point, and with kind of the MASH unit and, the injuries and it could not have come at a better time. So this is one of the most ideal bye weeks that I can remember from an injury standpoint, from a, maybe reset the clock a little bit. And then the way the rest of the season plays out, you got like a 3-game stretch, another bye, and then last 4. So
yeah,
I think it fits perfectly right where it is.
I think so too, especially if you're going to have 2 bye weeks. And this is the second year in a row they've got 2 bye weeks. And I'm not exactly sure why it worked out this way. Just I guess it's when people could fit their games in and stuff like that. But yeah, we're going to get through the injuries here in a minute. And obviously there's a pretty long list of injuries that the Irish have. But, Riley Leonard, with all the running that he does, is banged up to whatever extent, and we don't know what the actual, because it's kind of hard to believe really that, coming out of that Northern Illinois game, remember there was the reports that he tore a labrum in his non-throwing shoulder, all that stuff. He's never looked, again, it's his non-throwing shoulder, but he's never come up kind of lame on that shoulder, anything like that, looking like anything's wrong with it. Obviously he got the wind knocked out of him against Louisville and stuff like that. And if you're a running quarterback, I guess that kind of stuff is going to happen. But, so you look at that and it just sounds like with everything that they've been through, they sure needed a little bit of an extra week of rest to kind of recharge the batteries a little bit.
Yes, I think recharge the batteries injury-wise was massive. And then, we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but then, even an opportunity for potential guys to, make a statement and, potentially move into the starting lineup and things like that. So I think this was a really good time for the bye for this season.
Well, I'll go ahead and play this from Marcus Freeman. I wanted to slip this in there since I was kind of talking about it there, about Riley Leonard, the runner, because Freeman was asked this week if they need to dial that back at all for where they are. So here's what he said to that.
He's a threat with the ball in his hands, and, he gives our offense a chance to have success running the ball, and so we have to utilize his legs. We have to utilize his ability to run the ball, but also understand you don't want your quarterback getting hurt. But he wants the ball in his hands. He's a competitor, and we'll continue to utilize him in the running game where we feel necessary.
I don't know, Vince. You can't put bubble wrap on the guy. What do you think? Is there any reason to change what they're doing with Riley Leonard right now?
Nope, not a reason at all. I think we have seen firsthand what happens when you try to, manipulate what he's supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? Like, hey, stay in the pocket, throw the ball, that kind of a thing. It's not going to work out well. That's just not who he is. He has to be able to run the ball. He has to, he's one of those guys, I've coached football for a long time, and there's different kinds of guys, right? He is the kind of guy that kind of needs to be hit first before he kind of gets into the flow of the game. That's just who he is. I've had a lot of running backs like that, defensive players. They just want to hit the first guy that they see, and it kind of gets them motivated and focused and things like that. It's who Riley Leonard is, man. You've got to run him in order for him to be as effective of a quarterback as you want him to be. And that's okay. I'm not saying you need to run him 25 times a game or 20 times a game. But in order for this offense to be what it needs to be and be as balanced as it needs to be, Riley Leonard needs to have the ball in his hands as a runner.
That's the thing. I just feel like some people, like when these kind of questions come up, it's like, feels like people are just thinking in terms of a traditional quarterback, and
Right.
like, oh, you can't have your quarterback hit, and it's like he's a dual threat quarterback. A dual threat quarterback is going to take some hits. The question is, does he avoid the big hits the way he needs to? And for the most part, he has. Like there's nothing he could do about a 305-pound defensive lineman flopping down on him at the end of a run.
Yeah, cheap shot.
Exactly. So he's going to take some hits. And the other part of this is like the passing game is incomplete right now. It's
sure. Agreed.
It's pointing in the right direction, at least after the last couple of games, but that's still a work in progress. Whether people want that or not, it is, it's work in progress. And until that is more of a complete product, he's got to keep running. And just with the configuration of that offensive line, which we'll get into here in a little bit, like that's part of it as well. Like you can look and say, wow, they haven't given up sacks, so they're playing great. Well, it's, they play good in moments, but part of the reason they haven't given up sacks is because Riley Leonard can get himself out and go. He avoids a lot of those situations with the legs that he has. He's got to keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's who he is. That is what makes him dangerous. That's what makes this offense potentially dangerous, right? And Notre Dame knew this going in. I mean, they knew it's one of the reasons they went after him. I mean, let's be honest. He's a dual threat guy. I mean, they saw what he did to Clemson last year. They watched his tape. They didn't just go in blindly. They're like, we'll take this guy out of the portal. Like they did their homework. They know who he is.
They could have gone after Will Howard harder if they wanted to from Kansas State. They didn't. They went after Riley Leonard.
Correct. That he was their number one guy. He's who they wanted, and that's who they went out and got. And so they know that he has to be a dual threat. He's not going to sit in the pocket and pick you apart. That's just not who he is. And anybody that wants him to be that guy is just never going to be happy. That's
a fact. That's a fact.
Yeah.
The passing game is never going to look like 2015 when Deshaun Kaiser was thrown to Will Fuller. Like that's not what this offense is going to be. It's different. Now, I will say this because you've heard people trying to compare him to Brandon Wimbush and those kind of things. And, while Wimbush also had some issues, with like short quarter accuracy and just getting it out to the flat and those kind of things. I mean, there's some similarities there just in terms of, being able to make some of those easy layups. But at the same time, like as an all-around quarterback, I think that there is more to Riley Leonard's game than even what Wimbush was able to bring to the table.
Oh, I completely agree with that. I mean, look, Wimbush was a dynamic runner. He was more limited in the passing game, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Than Riley Leonard is, and that's my biggest miss, honestly, when it comes to projecting what a kid was going to be when he got to Notre Dame. I thought Brandon Wimbush was going to be
a lot of people thought that
bomb, man. Like I thought he was going to be one of the better quarterbacks in Notre Dame history, and it just didn't work out that way, obviously.
Right.
So, look, Riley Leonard's a better quarterback than Brandon Wimbush. He just is from a throwing standpoint, and he's more of a dynamic runner too, to be honest. So I think he's better kind of in both categories than Wimbush was when he got to Notre Dame.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. So Leonard is here. He's going. Just in terms of the injuries, there was an exceptionally long list coming out of the bye week. So kind of who's in and who's out against Stanford. Obviously, Boubacar Traore, unfortunately, is done. He tore his ACL against Louisville. He's done. One of two Vipers who are now out, along with Jordan Botelho. But the good news for Notre Dame is they're expecting to get Josh Burnham back. I mean, I guess, he was toying with, not toying, but trying to come back, trying to be ready for Louisville, but he just wasn't able to be ready for Louisville. So again, you get 2 weeks in between games now, and they listed him as probable this week, and they didn't move anyone in terms of, cross-training or anything like that to the Viper position. So it's Junior Tui Alamaka at number 1 on the depth chart at Viper. Josh Burnham is number 2. Logan Thomas is number 3. And then on the other side at the field end, you've got RJ Oben at number 1, Burnham again listed at number 2 there, and then Bryce Young at number 3. So, like, just with getting Burnham back, how big is that, do you think, for Notre Dame after he's been out these last 3 games with that ankle?
Well, it's massive. I mean, if he can be the Josh Burnham that he was before his injury, then that's a huge pickup for Notre Dame. I mean, I say pickup because he's been out for the last 3 games, right? It's almost like they went to the free agent portal and brought a guy in. Like, it's massive because I think there's people out there, and I would count myself amongst those people that think maybe he even should be a starter. And you and I talked about that in the show this week is, whether he's the guy out there on the first play or not, I don't really care about. I care about who's out there when it matters, right? And so I think Josh Burnham can be that guy. I think he can be one of those guys. And, I mean, we'll see how this game plays out. And I don't know if he's 100% or not. I don't know if he's just good enough to play. But I'm excited to have him back. I think that's a huge pick-me-up for Notre Dame. And if they weren't confident in Josh Burnham, wow, where did that come from? They weren't confident.
Season's changing, Vince. Woo! Season's changing.
If they weren't confident in Josh Burnham, they wouldn't have him listed at the depth chart at both positions.
Correct.
So, no, I think he's a big piece of what they're going to try to do defensively for sure.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, he has to be a big piece of what they want to do defensively because of what just the numbers that they have after losing 2 standout Vipers like that. And again, now you get Tui Alamaka over there and Josh Burnham. I will be curious to see kind of how much he plays on which side and who else is out there with him and all those kind of things. Just something to kind of keep an eye on against Stanford in this game. And I mean, those ends are going to be important as well. We're going to get to Stanford and Ashton Daniels and stuff in a little bit, a dual threat quarterback himself. Yep. So those ends are going to come into play, obviously. Jordan Faison tweaked his ankle again against Louisville. He's listed as probable for this game. That goes back to the Texas A&M game when he injured that ankle. Christian Gray missed the Louisville game. He's also listed as probable. He had a shoulder, and Marcus Freeman sounded pretty confident that he's going to be back. So that's pretty big for Notre Dame. Cooper Flanagan, most likely sounding like he'll be out. He's questionable anyway. Yeah. He missed the Louisville game with an ankle. And, of course, Billy Strouth, Gabe Rubio remain out. They're questionable as well. I mean, I think you probably look at Flanagan getting back before either of those other 2, but I wouldn't count on any of them being ready for this week's game. And then Sam Pendleton missed the last 5 plays of the Louisville game. Freeman said he had a concussion, and he's going to be back this week. So I think that's the most notables in terms of like who's definitely back for now.
That injury list, every time I read it, I get depressed.
I know.
I know. Awful. It's awful.
And what stinks is we can't get any Thursday updates like we used to. Marcus Freeman used to update it, but now what they're doing is just, here's our injury report on Monday. They put it in their game notes. And so you look at the game notes and you can kind of ask Freeman, whatever questions you want to based off on that on Monday. But then when he meets with the media Thursday, he's not doing the updates anymore because it's like, well, we gave you an injury report, so I got to talk about it.
I mean, I don't blame him. I mean, there it is.
No, I know. But we all want the info. And, what do we get asked about the most? Like, what did everyone ask about for 2 weeks? So, Boubacar Traore, is anyone hearing anything? And it's like, look, man, we got a press conference on Monday. We all find out together.
From what I understand, the people with the inside, sources and blah, 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 like they were being pretty tight-lipped about what was going on with some of those guys that got injured, Boubacar Traore being one of them. So, there wasn't really anything to report. Like we didn't have any kind of definitive information to
correct.
It's not like we were sitting on it, at least I wasn't. And I talked to Brian. He said he wasn't. He's like, people are really just aren't talking. And so, yeah, I mean, they're sticking pretty close to those injury reports and
for sure.
So
like you said, I don't blame them,
right.
They don't have to put out an injury report, but they do. So speaking of the offensive line, no changes coming out of the bye. And that was something that a lot of people were obviously very inquisitive about as well. Mike Denbrock did his meeting with the media earlier this week. And here's some of the comments that he had about giving some of the offensive linemen looks during the bye. So this is for Mike Denbrock. I think what you can do is you can plug even some of the younger kids that maybe haven't gotten an opportunity to play as much yet into some 11-on-11 situations, see what kind of makes them tick. And maybe they've been relegated most of the year so far to the scout team or the look team and haven't had those opportunities to go best on best. And the bye week, while you're resting some guys that maybe need a blow because of the number of snaps they've taken at this point in the season, it gives you a chance to kind of interject some of those guys in there and go, hey, that guy holds up pretty good. So it's a good way to evaluate those guys and see how much growth they've had from fall camp to now and whether they're getting better. Again, that's from Mike Denbrock. So no changes, but like you hear that, are you satisfied that they at least gave guys some looks during the bye week, Vince?
100%. I was hoping that would be the case. And as a coach, I coached in high school, so there are no bye weeks in the middle of the season, right? So you don't really have a chance to kind of sit back and kind of reevaluate some things. And, when you're not preparing for a game, but, in college, you kind of do have that opportunity. And it sounds like they use this opportunity because there have been so many injuries to the offensive line and everything that you just outlined. They gave guys a shot. And I think it was probably a legitimate shot. Again, I try to stress this as much as I possibly can. Coaches aren't going to purposely put guys in the game to start and to have significant playing time that they think aren't the best option. They want to win too. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to be, it's just the way it is, And so,
well, that's what everyone assumes. Oh, this guy's playing pets, is like he's playing favorites. He's got his pet project, all this stuff. Like, at
the end of the day, these coaches want to win because they're going to get fired if they don't win. I mean, it's a livelihood at this point. So, look, they gave those guys a chance. They weren't good enough to take over the starting spot. Maybe they were able to close the gap a little bit, or maybe they were able to push, maybe get a little playing time. I don't know because we haven't watched the game yet. But at the end of the day, they gave these guys a shot. It's what everybody wanted in the first place. It didn't work out. Like the guys that are starting are still the guys that are starting. So you do have to kind of give the coaches their credit, and you have to give them they're seeing in practice, they're watching these guys take reps, all of these different things. Whoever's in second right now is still in second because they're not ready to be in first. And that's what we have to accept as a fan base and as analysts, because we're not at practice. And so we have to accept what the coaches are thinking right now.
Well, look, if you want to read into what Mike Denbrock was saying in those comments as well, when he's saying you're resting guys that maybe need a blow because of the number of snaps they've taken to this point in the season. Well, the three guys who have played the most on the offensive line in terms of snap count, Sam Pendleton, 312, and that's even after coming out those few plays, at the end of Louisville because of the concussion. Emil Wagner with 297 and Anthony Knapp with 296. So like the two tackles, which, it's obviously the one tackle spot that everyone's talking about. Emil Wagner's been fine over on the right side, but again, like those are the three who have played the most snaps, and that's of anybody on the entire team to this point. They've even played more than Riley Leonard right now, who's gotten a little bit more of a breather with 286 total snaps that he's played this year. So again, if you're reading between the lines of what Denbrock was saying, the guys with the most snap counts maybe got a little bit more of a rest, and you played some younger guys or guys who haven't had the opportunity yet. So sure sounds like they gave some tackles some looks during the bye week, and they came out of that going, Anthony Knapp is still the guy on this, over here on the left side. So I just, and the other part of this is, like back to playing favorites and those kind of things. I mean, that was honestly something that BK used to do more of, especially with the veteran versus young guy thing. And, so like this Marcus Freeman and his staff have already shown that they're not afraid to play young guys if the situation warrants, like if those guys deserve to be out there on the field. Like they've played young guys, and we saw it more on the defensive side, obviously, by necessity against Louisville, and it's by necessity that Anthony Knapp is even out there on the left side to begin with, because of other injuries in front of him. So I don't think that there's a conspiracy to keep Knapp on the field and keep other guys off the field. I think that they're just at a point right now where he continues to be the best option, even though that might not make everybody happy right now.
I mean, look, he's getting better, had his best pass grade.
And that's still part of it as well. Had his best game against Louisville. Yep.
So, you have to take that into account. You can't just dwell on all the negative, right? So he's getting better. It might not be as fast as some people want it to be, but he is getting better. And so right now, Notre Dame thinks he gives them the best chance. Again, we're not at practice. I don't know that there's anybody pushing him right now, that there's anybody breathing down his neck. I don't know the answer to that. And according to the coaches at this point, based on the depth chart, the answer is no, they're not. So,
well, look, I asked specifically about Gerby Lambert, and he basically, Freeman basically said this week that Gerby's doing some nice things, but came in as a summer enrollee. Again, like if you listen to things that he's saying, like obviously we know that Anthony Knapp was a spring early enrollee, and Marcus Freeman specifically, not comparing the two, but he specifically said when he was talking about Gerby Lambert, this guy came in during the summer, and then, fall camp was his first exposure. He's gotten better, continues to, make progress in those kind of things. He didn't come out and say he's not ready. He just said, look, this is going to be a guy who's going to be good for us at some point in the future, but the future is just not right now for Gerby Lambert, regardless of his star rating and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yep. I mean, he's going to be great for Notre Dame eventually. It's not now. I mean, that's just where they're at.
So there were some notable upsets, of course, last week in college football. You may remember that Alabama lost to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, briefly.
Or that Tennessee lost to Arkansas and Michigan lost to Washington. So Freeman talked a little bit about this week about how to avoid those kind of upsets.
Yeah, I didn't get the chance to watch all the games. Saw bits and pieces of each game, just, maybe being at home with the family. But I think for me, I've really tried to research, hey, what are the coaches saying? Like, what are the reasons that they didn't succeed on that Saturday? And, as you look, there's a common thread of not starting fast, right? Getting behind early in the game. They're third down, right? They struggle maybe third down, MAs, penalties, turnover margin. And as you go back and you look at what happened with us versus Northern Illinois, there was very similar reasonings behind the outcome. So we have to understand as a program, as a head coach, our players, like, hey, these are the areas that really factor into the result of a loss, and use that to attack practice, use that to prepare the right way, so that on Saturday we don't let one of those things happen.
So start fast, be good on third down. What do you think, Vince?
I mean, that would be the recipe to winning games. I mean, we talk about, it's funny because we always do the keys to victory revisited during Upon Further Review, and Brian always puts his keys to victory together, blah, blah, blah. Number one is always start fast offensively, always. And he's absolutely right. You much rather want to play from ahead than you want to play from behind. I mean, that duh, like that, that I would say that for any sport known to man, right? And so that's absolutely what you want to do. And right now, third down's not a fun down for Notre Dame. That's something that they absolutely need to work on. And so start fast and be successful on third down. Yep. You do those two things, you're going to win a lot of football games.
It's interesting because I saw something the other day, and we were talking about Navy in our show yesterday. And I was talking about how first down is the key to solving Navy. Get them behind the chains. Obviously, with an option team, you get them behind the chains and you make things a lot more difficult for them. If it's 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9 versus 2nd and 5. But when Notre Dame, I can't remember where I saw this. When Notre Dame has faced 2nd and 10, they have, like during any drive, if they have had 2nd and 10, they have not scored a touchdown this year. and it's more likely that they're going to punt or, in a couple cases, settle for a field goal if they faced 2nd and 10. They've got to turn their own first down. So again, like you talk about 3rd down, but it's also, okay, what are you doing on 1st down to set yourself up for a better 3rd down situation? And that's kind of part of what's crazy about having Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Riley Leonard as runners is that they haven't had more success on 1st down than what they've had at different points throughout the course of the season so far.
Yeah, I mean that they need to. They obviously don't have success on 3rd down, or at least not enough of it for my liking. And so 1st and 2nd down, they have to be better.
But Jeremiah Love has also not converted a 3rd down for him this year, which is like because exactly he's not on the like. There have been some times when he has, but it's like we've talked about it. Like, how do you take your best offensive weapon off the field on 3rd down so often?
He must not be good at something. Like there must be a reason that they don't have him down. I just don't know what it is. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what Aeneas Williams brings to the table that Jeremiah Love doesn't. I think that's my biggest thing. What category is he better than Jeremiah Love? Like, that's what I need to know.
I mean,
right?
It's got to be pass blocking, right? Like, that's the only thing. That's
Jeremiah
the only thing I can think of.
Pretty good pass blocker, Sean. Like, I don't know that I believe that excuse.
I don't know.
I don't know. Or they just want to get him off the field so that he saves his legs or something along those lines. Or
I mean, I would rather see 21 personnel with Love obviously being part of it than seeing, just 11 or 12 person, whatever it happens to be, and him being on the sideline with Aeneas Williams or Devin Ford being out there on the field. Like, it just makes no sense to me to take him off.
Right. I can't even tell you how much I would like to disagree with you, but I can't.
Because, I mean, there are things you can do, like everyone talks about jet sweeps. We haven't seen a whole lot of that. Like, some of the jet sweeps we've seen have been to, like, Jaden Thomas or Bo Collins, I think. Again, not that that's going to be your staple, but whether it's a jet sweep or a shovel pass or, just a standard, have both of them back there in the backfield with Riley Leonard. That seems like a pretty good setup to me when you're talking about, like putting a defense in some jeopardy by having your best offensive weapon out there on the field on the money down.
Yeah.
So, I don't get it.
Makes sense to me.
Makes sense to a lot of us, but not to the top, I guess. So as we kind of look into the Stanford game now, Marcus Freeman played last year's Louisville game, apparently on a loop going into the game 2 weeks ago as some motivation for his team. So what's motivation this week against a Stanford team that won when they were here 2 years ago look like?
I hope that the motivation from the Louisville loop wasn't to mentally get them motivated, as more as to see plays from that game of 2 years ago that could help them learn so they could perform better on Saturday. The same thing this week, right? Is at times you have to study the past to learn from the mistakes so you can make sure you can perform better on Saturday. It's a rivalry game, so that's a lot of our motivation is to compete in this rivalry game. But at the end of the day, we got to continue to chase, being the best version of ourselves, reaching our full potential, and that's the motivation, all the motivation you need. There's different ways that you can motivate them daily, but at the end of the day, we are trying to chase to reach our full potential, and we want to make sure we win this Legends Trophy.
Yeah, I don't know how much playing the Stanford game from 2 years ago helps because David Shaw was still the head coach and Troy Taylor's the head coach now. But
there's a lot of differences with this Notre Dame team between then and now, too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not enough. It's not enough to play that on a loop. I mean, was it embarrassing to lose to Stanford? Yeah, it certainly was. Stanford was an awful football team. They're a lot better this time around, and they're good enough this year that they should get Notre Dame's attention. Like, this isn't a situation where they're playing an FCS team or whatever, and that, Notre Dame's going to think that they're going to walk all over them or what. I mean, this team's good enough to get their attention.
And honestly, I think that was part of the problem 2 years ago is,
Right.
they looked at the record. Bad. Yeah, they looked at they were so bad. They hadn't beaten an FBS team and,
Right.
whatever that streak was at that point and all that different stuff. And
right.
They obviously kind of like what they apparently did against Northern Illinois a few weeks ago. Just feels like they overlooked them. I don't think they're going to overlook them this time.
I don't think so either. And I would like to think, even though this kind of mirrors 2 years ago where they lost early to a MAC team or, and then or not, they weren't MAC.
Group of 5. Yeah.
MAC level.
Yeah.
To Marshall, and then they come back and then they lose at home to Stanford. They need to get over that hump, obviously, right? I mean, they can't lose to Stanford. I think at the very least, they can understand and appreciate the history of 2 years ago and the way that season unfolded and not make that same mistake twice. But the specifics to the game, I don't think are really necessary to, put on a loop or whatever. It's the circumstances of the game that I would frequently remind them of. Like, look, you lost, 2 years ago, we lost early to a group of 5 team, and then we lost at home to Stanford. This year, we lost early to a group of 5 team. Now we got Stanford at home. Are we trying to repeat history or are we trying to learn from it?
Yeah.
That's the lesson. That's the motivator, in my opinion, for this week.
And I don't know. I'll save the rivalry talk for rapid fire because Marcus Freeman likes to bring up the Legends Trophy and the rivalry aspect. And
I feel like he gets. I feel like he gets some sort of like remuneration every time
for reminding people it's a rivalry game.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time you mention the Legends Trophy, we'll stick $1,000 onto your contract.
Like, do you think Stanford really considers this a rivalry game? Like, I don't know what Stanford considers anything. I know Cal Stanford is a rivalry. I don't know. It's like this is just never.
The answer to me is no. They don't consider this a rivalry based on the people that are in the seats at.
It feels like there'd be more people at a game when they play in Palo Alto.
Yes, that's my point exactly.
Yeah,
it's like a Notre Dame home game when they're out there. So
right,
yeah,
for what seats are actually filled.
Correct.
So Stanford's 2-3. Their wins are against Cal Poly and Syracuse, and their losses are to TCU, Clemson, and Virginia Tech. And the Clemson and Virginia Tech games were both blowouts, and those are their last 2 games coming into this one. And their starting quarterback, Ashton Daniels, of course, was injured a lower leg. I believe it was an ankle. Lower leg is the official word. In the loss to Clemson, so he missed last week's game against the Hokies when they lost 31-7. And Troy Taylor, their head coach, did say earlier this week that Daniels is going to be available to face he expects him to be available. So how big a difference do you think that could make if Daniels is actually able to play this week?
Oh, it's massive. I mean, he's the straw that stirs the drink offensively for them. He's a legitimate dual threat guy. I mean, he can hurt you with his legs. He can hurt you with his arm. If the backup had to play, I don't think you would be as afraid of the pass game as you would with Daniels in the game. And so, look, I think it gives. If we're last time we're talking about focus and not overlooking a team, having the starting quarterback in the game will allow them to continue to focus on, the Stanford offense and all that. And again, I'm not saying that they're not focused, but when the starting quarterback is out, I can understand losing a little bit of focus. You know what I mean? Especially when there's this big of a drop off like there is from 1 to 2 for Stanford. Having Daniels in the game makes them a legitimate offense, and it makes them a legitimate threat to do some things offensively. And so I'm not saying they're going to overwhelm Notre Dame or anything like that, but I am saying that he is their best player. He's their best offensive player, and he's on the field. Somebody you got to take into account.
What's interesting about him is like when I look at numbers and stuff, he is Stanford's leading rusher with 250 yards, and Micah Ford, the running back, has 230 yards. He hurt his leg last week against Virginia Tech, so he may or may not play also. But Justin Lamson, who played against Notre Dame last year, actually had 82 rushing yards against the Irish in that game. Now part of that is because of the way the game, kind of played out and some scrambles and that could, like some easy yards and that kind of stuff. But that's like the most he's ever had in a game, but he is not a rusher at all this year. It's obviously Daniels, like between the two, Daniels is much more an actual true dual threat type guy. But they've also combined to be sacked 15 times in 5 games. Lamson was sacked 5 times by Virginia Tech last week. So, and like that alone, I think kind of tells you like the kind of quarterback he is and the kind of system they have and everything else. They need Dan, kind of like Notre Dame needs Riley Leonard and his dual threat capabilities to make the offense go. Stanford really needs Daniels even more.
Oh, big time. I mean, he is this offense. He is the offense, right? I mean, that's the easiest way to put it. He is the offense. And if Notre Dame is going to beat Stanford, they need to shut him down, both on the ground and through the air. And I have a lot of faith that they're going to be able to do that, but they still have to do it. And Stanford has a much better chance if he's playing, and it sounds like he is, than if he wasn't. So he is the offense, Sean.
And their best wide receiver, Eluk Iomanner, 317 yards so far this season. And, he was respectable, I guess, against Notre Dame last year, 7 catches for 58 yards, but nothing like the 13-catch, 294-yard game that he had against Colorado last year.
Right. Yeah.
It's like that is a season for some guys that he had in that one game against Colorado last year. Obviously, he's going to be like between Daniels and Iomanner, like those are the 2 focal points of this entire offense, I'd have to think.
No doubt. And that, still have a lot of faith in Notre Dame's defense, obviously, to go up against those guys and their past defense and containing the quarterback and all of those, various aspects to being a good defensive team. But you can't take these guys lightly. Like they've shown what maybe not as consistently as maybe Stanford fans would like them to, but they have shown they can be dynamic at times. They can put up big numbers at times. You just can't allow that to happen if you're Notre Dame. That's going to be the biggest key. Don't let those guys have a career day when they're playing you. I mean,
that's why it's also important to get Christian Gray back for this game.
Absolutely. And look, here's the bottom line, right? Notre Dame's not Colorado. I mean, they're better than Colorado. Sorry, Colorado fans.
As a team, they're better than Colorado. But yes. Colorado does have Travis Hunter. It's not like Travis Hunter's a slouch. So, yeah.
I'm not saying that he is. I'm saying as a team, though, Notre Dame is light years beyond, especially defensively.
Right. So here's what Al Golden says stands out to him about Stanford's offense. Constant change of personnel, shifts, motions, challenges the perimeter, run schemes, different empties he gets to, good screen game, the whole field is challenged. So what do you think that means for the Irish in this matchup?
Oh, that means they're going to have to be disciplined defensively. They can't just pin their ears back and come after Daniels. They got to make sure they keep him in the pocket. And they also have to make sure that they are staying, like I said, staying disciplined so that they don't just come off the ball and then get hit with the screen game. You know what I mean? And so Notre Dame's athleticism will be tested sideline to sideline, and that's okay by me because they have great athleticism sideline to sideline. So if a team wants to stretch you from width-wise, I've got faith Notre Dame will be just fine. And they just, again, they need to keep the quarterback in the pocket, and they need to stay disciplined with their pass rush.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Well, and by that, you can't run past the quarterback. Exactly. that's a huge thing. You got to run to that outside shoulder and funnel him inside, not let him get outside. And that's going to be, that's absolutely right. That's going to be huge for Notre Dame in this matchup against Daniels specifically. And then, like with the shifts and the motions and all that different stuff, I'll be curious to see how Golden plays this because he is such an aggressive caller on defense, but some of this eye candy and stuff like that with some of the motions, that's what's hurt Notre Dame this year as well. So, so again, it's like, what have you learned against maybe Northern Illinois and Miami, even at times? Like, what have you learned from those games? And, to an extent, probably against Louisville as well. But, what have you learned from that you can apply to this now against Stanford? Because I don't think we're, with the exception of the 2 guys we've talked about, the quarterback and the receiver, I don't think there's a ton of overall skill talent there. The offensive line is also not that good. So what that means for Notre Dame's front seven in terms of can they be a little bit more destructive up front, to kind of blow some stuff up before some of that stuff occurs. It'd be nice to see, I think.
I'd be okay with it.
But some of this stuff is also what we were saying 2 years ago when they were hosting Stanford, even with the different, not the motions and stuff up, but just like what they should have been able to take advantage of.
Yes.
So
yeah, that was, wow. We don't need to talk about 2 years ago, but Notre Dame just needs to come out. They need to play their game. They need to be disciplined. They need to be fired up and ready to play, and they'll be just fine. That's my take.
I concur, Vince. With that, are you ready for rapid fire?
I'm always ready, baby. Let's go. Game day rapid fire.
Yeah, baby. So let's get to the rivalry conversation. Stanford is one of Notre Dame's rivalry games. How would you rank Notre Dame's list of top 5 all-time rivals? What would your list look like?
Top 5. Okay. USC.
I concur with that.
Michigan.
I was wondering if you would even include them there because of your hatred for Michigan, but I agree as well. I mean, you've got it because we're talking all-time rivals. So USC and Michigan, we're both lockstep on those.
Okay. Let's see here.
Do we include Navy? Like they play them every year. Like do we consider that one of their top rivals?
That's tough, man. Like
this is my biggest question really is where Navy fits in.
I consider them an awesome little brother, but I don't necessarily consider them a rival. Every once in a while.
Once they start winning, once they won a few games, it obviously changed things.
Every once in a while, little brother gets the best of big brother, but for the majority of the time, that big brother dominates little brother. And I think that kind of describes what Navy is, right? I mean,
do you consider Navy more of a rivalry than Stanford?
Yes.
That didn't take you long to spit that out.
Yeah, I would come up with Purdue, Michigan State,
and Boston College.
Boston College, I think that's a good one. Honestly, I would come up with all of those before I would come to Stanford. Stanford is the most fabricated rivalry I think that exists on Notre Dame's schedule because they wanted to get out to California. So it's like, We'll play you just like we play USC.
We used you, and now we're going to consider you a rival. We're going to keep you on so we can consider you a rival.
Exactly. Like we'll make you a rival. We'll even get a trophy.
Yeah.
If you can make sure that we're out there.
I didn't realize they've been playing for the Legends Trophy since 1989. Like
I didn't realize that either.
And that was like the third. I think they've been playing every year. Well, every year since, with the exception of COVID, since '87. But in '89, the third year they started playing, they came up with this Legends.
They came up with the trophy. See, I'd say fabricated. Fabricated.
Like, how do you make it? How do you start playing for a trophy the third year you're playing against the team?
Weak.
It just, like you said, it feels like Notre Dame just buttered these guys up.
Yes.
Like, come on, let's keep playing. We'll even come up with a trophy for this thing.
It's the least. Like, I don't even know what all the trophies are for Notre Dame, to be honest. I know. But of all of them, this is by far the bottom of the list for me. It's the bottom. I know they've got one for Michigan State. I think they've got one for Purdue. They got one for Boston College. They've got one for USC.
They've got one for Navy.
They've got – okay. I don't think I even realized that, to be perfectly honest with you. But, yeah, Stanford's at the bottom of the list. I'm sorry. They always will be. And I have advocated, and so have you, for a long time, get this off the schedule. Just put them in. If they're part of the ACC, Notre Dame did them a solid by getting them pulled into the ACC. Awesome, fine. I have no problem with that. Put them on the ACC rotation. That's where I'm at with Stanford.
I think so too. It is not important to, the question is, does Notre Dame still want to get to California every other year? And now, I saw this on a thread, and we've talked about this before, but as of right now, Notre Dame and Stanford both only have, like if you look at that website that's got all the future schedules, Notre Dame and Stanford still only have 11 games showing on their schedule next year.
Yeah.
Back, I think it was in July, Bernard Muir, their athletic director, did an interview on I think it's called the Tree podcast. It's like their, in-house podcast. And he said that things were pointing toward the series was going to be renewed, but they
Yeah.
just hadn't finalized things yet. But, because I saw some speculations on our Champions Lounge about, well, who's Notre Dame going to put on the schedule next year since Stanford's not going to be there? I don't think from what I have heard, it's not final that Stanford is not going to be there next year. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But, you and I have talked before, like you've got Cal as part of this ACC deal now as well. Why not just go 2-2? So like 1 year you're going to so next year you go to Cal, and then 2 years after that you go to Stanford, and you just rotate through since both of those teams are on there now. I don't think you need to keep playing Stanford all the time.
No, you absolutely do not need to keep playing Stanford. I don't like, okay, getting to California, I just don't feel like is as big of a deal as it used to be, especially Northern California.
Right.
Like, how many guys are you really pulling from Northern California?
It's the trip to Los Angeles that means a heck of a lot more than up there by the bay. Yeah.
100% agree. I just getting to the state, like this isn't 1937 where they take a train all the way out to California, and while they're out there, they might as well recruit. You got a private jet. You can go wherever you want, whenever you want. Like, I'm sorry. It's just, no.
I mean,
get away from it.
We've kind of gone down this road anyway, but the question was going to be, it would be blank if Notre Dame never plays Stanford again.
Totally fine by me.
It would be no skin off my back, baby. That's right.
It really wouldn't, man. It really wouldn't. I will say this. I know that Notre Dame tries to, play like-minded universities, and I don't have a problem with that.
And that's part of what I think is keeping it on here, and why Jack Swarbrick obviously pushed, was because you've got two high-end academic institutions, and he didn't want to see them, figuratively fall off into the ocean when the Pac-12 dissolved.
And I have no problem with that. And I wouldn't have a problem with them playing Stanford every now and again. I just don't think it should be annually. You know what I mean? I respect the fact that Notre Dame wants to play high academic institutions. Okay, cool. I don't have a problem with that. If you want to do that once, maybe twice a year, fine. You get the Northwestern on there. You get Stanford on there. You get Cal on there. But to your point, you can flip-flop Cal and Stanford. And that's fine too. Those are both high academic, universities. So it just doesn't have to be Stanford every single year.
No, I mean, shouldn't it be just as much a priority to get to Texas? Right? You've got SMU as part of this new ACC as well. Like, it's just, I think that there are more options. Like, you don't have to keep it. And I think that probably part of what's holding up the renewal of this deal is, sort of because Stanford is part of this ACC deal now, like how that, would Notre Dame play the 5 ACC schools plus Stanford? Because I've heard that they would still keep Stanford on there, but it wouldn't be part of the ACC deal, that kind of thing. But, look, they used to play Boston College and Pittsburgh much more regularly as well, but those are now intermittent because they're part of the ACC, and so they fell off like the core schedule, and they're just part of the ACC rotation. And I think that that's the same thing that should happen to Stanford. I'm sorry, I don't see them as a must-have on the schedule by any means.
Could not agree more. I tried to do a little bit of research on the trophies. Technically, I think there's 5 trophies. I don't see one for Navy. Not saying I don't believe you, because I always do.
I thought that maybe it was just that walking stick that, the shillelagh that they got out there. Maybe I was confusing it for
Ireland.
Something else. Yeah.
So the shillelagh is the Purdue one. The megaphone is Michigan State. The Legends Trophy is Stanford. The jeweled
shillelagh is USC, right?
USC, and the Leahy Memorial Bowl is Boston College.
Okay. And so there's no trophy with Michigan, huh?
No, there's not. Of those 5, I mean, Stanford is a distant 5th, aren't they?
Yes.
I mean, good grief. So, and Michigan, even though there's no trophy, I would still put them on the list, as much as I don't like to use their name. I use their name in vain as much as possible. But
I mean, look, Notre Dame USC are still, part of like what people like a classic college football matchup. But obviously Notre Dame and Michigan, like I think that more people nationally, like when they think of good big national rivals, Notre Dame, Michigan obviously come to mind for a lot of people.
Yep.
And they're disappointed to see it off the schedule. So what's the first thing you think of when you think of Stanford football?
The stupid dancing tree. I know I should probably think of something more football related, like John Elway, or the band is on the field, or something.
That's honestly the first thing I think of. The band is on the field from the Cal Stanford game.
That was before my time. Like I know that it exists, but it wasn't a big deal to me because I didn't live it. You know what I mean? Like,
and we're talking about 40 years ago at this point. So
right, I was very, very young at the time. I was gonna say I was in diapers, but I doubt it. I don't know, maybe. But anyway, I didn't live through it, so that one doesn't come to me obviously as much. And so the more recent Stanford stuff, like us Notre Dame not allowing the band to come to Notre Dame, and that dancing tree, and like honestly, for me, when I think of Stanford, I think of Harbaugh. Like that's what I think of when I think of Stanford football. I think of Harbaugh. I think of Shaw. That's Stanford football to me. And so it's different, I think, for a lot of other people because, like yourself, the band is on the field, John Elway, all of the history that is Stanford football. I get that. But for me, it's more, I guess, the more recent stuff.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, that's one that I not grew up with, but I think it was early teen at that point, like when the band was on the field. But, again, like for the last 40 years, like every time the Cal Stanford game comes up, you're going to see the band is on the field and the whole, that whole thing. And that's why that's what I think. I think a little bit of Bill Walsh because he obviously was there for a little bit. And then, you're right. Probably after that, like just in terms of recency, the Harbaugh Shaw era. And then, and again, it's like, that's why, I guess, okay, maybe it benefits Notre Dame because like, what is this Stanford program actually going to be going forward? Because like the Harbaugh Shaw years were the most successful era of Stanford football ever. Yeah. Is it ever even going to be close to being like that again?
Like if you said, hey, name a Stanford quarterback, I would say Andrew Luck first, and then I would probably say John Elway. Like those are the two.
Yeah. See, I would go the reverse, again, being a little bit older. I would say Elway than Luck.
Yeah. Totally get that. So like that's more my recollection of who Stanford is and like just their mouthy fans and band. I'll say band.
Yes.
I don't really have any negative connotations towards.
I was going to say, like again, like if this is really a rivalry, when have you ever actually squared off with any, any Stanford fans? It's like there's always even around here, there's always some USC fan. There are plenty of USC fans who live in South Bend who you hear from time to time.
100%.
It's not like that with Stanford. I have never encountered in the wild a Stanford football fan talking smack.
Well, like, have you ever seen? Okay, here's a. Have you ever seen a Stanford fan jump into our chat and just start talking smack?
Very true. All week long.
I mean?
Like who is? Yeah. Oh, we're gonna kick your butt.
Never.
It's gonna be ugly. And yeah, that's right.
Never. So that's how I judge my fan.
We had Louisville fans jump in. We had Texas A&M fans jump in.
Ohio State. Michigan.
Yeah.
All the teams that you would expect, right? Didn't see any Stanford fans in the chat this week. So just saying.
Fair point. Over under 300 total yards for Riley Leonard for the Cardinal against the Cardinal.
This is so hard for me. I do feel like he has an opportunity to do it. I'm thinking like 225 through the air, maybe 75 on the ground, like maybe that neighborhood. I think would be a really, really good day for Riley Leonard. And you throw in maybe 3 touchdowns total. And I don't care how they come, passing, running, doesn't matter. So I'm going to say over. I'm going to be optimistic, but I think this could be a good game with him going up against the 122nd ranked pass defense in the country.
Very true.
If you're not going to be able to get a few yards in this game, then when are you? I guess is a good question to ask. I don't want to say that, because as soon as I say that, when he doesn't do that,
I know,
post game show or something,
it blows up and you're going to hear about it.
Correct.
Yep,
Even though Notre Dame won by like 30 points, Riley Leonard didn't have a good day passing the game against the 122nd team in the country. I'm just saying, I think he probably should. But if he doesn't and they win by a lot, I don't care.
Let me ask you this. Last year versus this year, did you look forward to the post-game show last year, or did you dread it? Same question for this year. Is there more dread this year going into these shows, even though they're 4-1, than there was last year?
Yes, there's more dread. Yes, 100%. This is what I'll say. The only ones I dreaded last year were obviously after the losses. I hate doing shows after losses, more because I'm emotional about it too, and then I just want to fight with everybody, and it's never good.
Right.
But this year, and I'll say it, what was in the Louisville game when Riley Leonard goes down and Steve Angeli he came into the game, I'm like, oh, the post-game show is going to be awful.
Here we go. All the Angeli lovers are going to be out.
That was my instant take. As soon as he walked on the field, I'm like, oh God, don't lead them on 7 touchdown drives in a row. That was my immediate. So the dread is more real this year than it has been last year. Yes, no doubt.
I kind of had a feeling, but I was just curious.
But here's the key: I won't be on the post game show on Saturday.
Oh, you won't? I didn't realize that.
I will be up in Hillsdale, Michigan, with my son. So,
all right,
I'm tapping out.
Well, enjoy the trip. Enjoy the trip. Do you know who's going to be there? Is Brian going to be there since you're not, or will it be the other guys?
Brian will be there. I think Ryan will be there. I think, and Sean will be there. I believe Trevor. Somebody's not going to be there, and I can't remember who it is. I think it's Trevor, but I'm not 100% sure. It could be Ryan. It went in one ear and out the other since I'm not on it. But there will be a post-game show, so don't fret, my pet. It'll be okay. Not you, everybody listening.
I'm gonna go under the 300. Yeah. I think he's gonna be in the ballpark. I'm in the 270-ish. And I think that he's got a really good shot at finally getting his first 200-yard passing game of the season, and then another 65, 70 rushing yards or something like that. Yeah. So I think he's going to be a little bit shy. The closest that he's come so far is 297 total yards against Miami in that game. So,
So
I'm going to go just under.
All right.
Stanford's run defense allowing 88.2 yards per game. Do you buy or sell Notre Dame having one player get to at least that many rushing yards against the Cardinal?
That's a big buy for me. I think somebody gets 100 yards in this game. So I just think they're going to pop off a big run. And then after that, it won't be very hard to get to the 88 or 89 in this case. I will buy this all day long.
They have Jadarian Price. Jeremiah Love has only hit that number on the ground twice this season. Jadarian Price has not hit that number this season, which seems amazing. When you look at the fact that he had a 70-yard run against Purdue, but he only had 86 yards in that game.
It's close.
But again, I just said, I don't think Riley Leonard's going to quite get there. He's done it twice. I've got to think they're going to have one guy get that number, because I just feel like, they are good against the run, and Leonard is going to have to show that, he can hit some passes to kind of loosen Stanford up a little bit. But I just feel like with the home run threats between Price and Love that Notre Dame has, one of those guys is going to get it. So I'm going to say yes.
All right. I can get on board with that.
fill in the blank. The non-Notre Dame game you are most interested in this week is blank.
I'm trying to decide between the Ohio State Oregon game, which is probably the answer here, or what was the other one?
Red River or
no,
Penn State USC.
I think it's Penn State USC. That I think is the other one that I'm very much interested in. Yeah, I mean LSU Mississippi is an interesting one as well. I think Ohio State Oregon. I don't know. I think we could have a couple more upsets this week. To be perfectly honest with you, I think it's going to be fun to watch.
Ooh, does that mean Vince is picking Oregon to win this game?
No, but I am picking USC to win the game.
Ooh, okay. All right. Vince is hot on USC. I mean, it's Ohio State, Oregon for me. I think that this is honestly one of the most anticipated games of the entire season. You know, kind of like when the season was started, the fact that you've got Oregon new to the Big Ten and you've got Ohio State going out there to the West Coast and just a huge primetime matchup. I am glad that it starts at 7:30, so I'll probably get home right around halftime, maybe a little bit before halftime by the time our game's over with and get some stuff done and be able to watch some of that tomorrow night while those other guys are doing the post-game show. But that's when I'm looking for. I was trying to find the start time. There it is. Wow, USC Penn State is a 3:30 kickoff. So it's kicking off at 12:30 local time in Los Angeles.
Yep.
That's kind of crazy. I wish that was a later kickoff, honestly, because I'd like to be able to watch that one.
I know, right?
As well.
Except the old record button.
Yeah. After watching Miami games the last 2 weeks, which do you think is true? ACC officials are favoring the Hurricanes, or ACC officials are just bad at their job?
I'm okay. I never want to say that officials are biased towards one team or the other, but I will absolutely say that they're not good officials. So I'm going to go with the latter and hope that there's no malice intent. You know what I mean? They just suck. They're just not.
They don't mean to be bad. They're bad.
They're just bad. Like, look,
Robert Saleh didn't mean to be a bad coach. He was just a bad coach.
Look, there is an officials shortage in this country.
Yep.
And it goes all the way to the top. So I just think they're bad.
And I think it's been more obvious in the last few years. Like when you look at how all of that has kind of contributed, because I mean, it starts with like the best officials at the high school level move up into the college ranks, the best from the college ranks move into the NFL. And like, when you look at, like growing up, you used to be like, when I would turn on it was like Ed Hockley on an NFL game all the time. And some of these other guys, like doing these NFL games, and like most of those veteran senior guys are all gone. And that means college guys have moved into that ranks. And so that just means it's filtered. And the fact that fewer people are becoming officials now, I think that, I think the NFL has continued to keep a much better standard because, they are constantly reviewing those guys and going over those things. And, I think their replay system is better and all that stuff. And, that's part of it as well. Especially it becomes obvious when you're watching games with an ACC officiating crew, is that there is still too much subjectivity that goes into replay reviews up in the booth. And it is supposed to be black and white. Either you see clear evidence to overturn a call or uphold a call, or you don't. And I think that they are allowing too much of their own judgment to come into play still in these replays. And so I completely agree with you. I think it is just bad, but there are contributing factors to why it's bad. Because I'm like you. Like, I don't buy into the conspiracy theories, but it sure does appear right now that the way these couple games have gone, again, like when you look at the replay, like that touchdown at the end of the Virginia Tech game, are you telling me that there's anything you saw clearly in that after 7 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it was that told you that you should overturn that call? There's nothing in that replay that said you could overturn that call.
Agreed.
Yet they did.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Yep. Okay, so I kept checking on the apps and have not been able to find any player props for this game. So we don't have
They're
much in the
just as
way.
confused as we are.
I know. That's probably it. Notre Dame is favored by 23.5 points, and the over-under is 45.5. How comfortable are you with the 23.5 point spread?
I mean, the short answer is I'm not comfortable with it. That's over 3 touchdowns, obviously, for anybody that knows anything about math. Man, I'm not comfortable with it. That's the best thing I can say. I am not comfortable with it. I'm trying to remember what my score prediction was.
I just double checked mine.
I need to look. Okay, let me do the math. 20, 25. Well, I've got to win them by 25. So
okay.
I guess I'm good with the spread, Sean.
All right. I've got him winning by 21. So I am not. I am confident in the over, though, based on what I have. The over 45.5.
As am I. I am over the 45.5 as well. So I will take the over.
And it's interesting. I had not looked at, because they also give like the point total over-unders for each team individually. And Notre Dame's is 34.5. Stanford's is 10.5. Do you have over or under the 34.5 for Notre Dame?
I have over.
I've got just under on that, but I've got over for Stanford on the 10.5.
Yeah, I do too. I have over for Stanford as well.
Do you want to go ahead and give your prediction then?
Might as well at this point. Everybody's probably waiting with anxious anticipation.
Oh, yes.
We're teasing people with what we're saying. I've got Notre Dame winning 38-13. I think they're going to be able to put some points on the board in this game, both on the ground and through the air. I think the 13 is not indicative of how well the defense plays. I think they might maybe throw a touchdown in maybe late against the second teamers, kind of the deal. I think, there's a chance that Notre Dame holds Stanford to a couple of field goals and then they get a late touchdown. That's how I got to 13. And, the 38 is a bit of a pull out of the air, but that's 5 touchdowns and a field goal. I think that's very possible in this game. And I think Notre Dame will control this game. I think they're the better football team. And I guess I got them clearing the spread of 23.5.
I'm curious to see, because we both kind of felt like they downshifted, and like they down throttled against Louisville a couple of weeks ago after they did get the lead. Yeah, like with some of their play calling and stuff like that, and just kind of the way they were doing things. And it's like I'd like to see them try to play a complete game, and like that's what I want to see.
Yeah, right.
So like the 38, the only time so far Notre Dame has got to that number is the 66 that they put on Purdue a month ago at this point. But I've got them a little, like I said, I've got them at 34 points. So I've got them just a half point under. I didn't, again, I didn't know that Notre Dame's single over under was 34.5. I've got them winning 34-13. And I'm kind of like you, like I think that the defense is going to be in really good shape. The biggest question is going to be, does Stanford hit a play or two here or there that, ultimately maybe puts them in field goal range and those kind of things? Do they get a junk touchdown at the end of the game? Because I do think it's the kind of game where Notre Dame should be able to score some points. But, like the 31 that they had last week 2 weeks ago against Louisville is the best that they've done so far this year. But I just feel like this should set itself up for Notre Dame to have its most complete game of the season on both sides of the ball. Special teams, like that is still a question. I think, that's kind of something I'm going to be watching in this game. I think a lot of us are kind of focusing on that. Like that needs to be cleaned up. There are just a lot of things that need to be cleaned up on special teams right now.
Consistency is crucial. Consistency is crucial special teams wise, because they haven't.
Yeah,
I don't think they've achieved consistency on special teams just yet.
Not at all. So you've got them 38-13. I've got them 34-13. We weren't too far off.
No,
we've been pretty close on a lot of our predictions, I think, this year.
You and I are right there, by the way, on the season of predictions. I don't know if you saw that.
I haven't seen the season total. I'm pretty sure I took a goose egg last week during the bye week.
You were 0-3. I don't know what I was, but I was
like every game. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? It's like I didn't pick a game right. I don't think
you did not, and it allowed me to catch up. That's basically what happened.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember.
Crazy
exactly
weekend. But I was surprised. I was surprised he didn't put the Cal Miami game on the list for us to pick last week.
That's a good point.
Because I honestly was working on a prediction for that, and then I looked at the list and I'm like, holy, he didn't even put that on the list. Like that's one of the big matchups.
Brian's leading 17-5. Nick and I are 16-6, and then you are 15-7. And then Trevor and Andrew are tied with you at 15-7, and Joe is 13-5.
Man, after that rough week that I had last week.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So you're only 2 games back of the lead, but you're
we're all pretty close. We're all pretty close.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, that's going to do it. Enjoy the game. And of course, after the game, the post-game show right here on this channel. So be sure and find it. Vince and I think you're back with me on Monday, right?
As far as I know.
Okay. Back to the regular co-host schedule, I guess was my point. Okay. All right. So we will talk to you then. Enjoy the game. Looking like beautiful weather here this weekend. Might actually have to take the sunglasses back out to Notre Dame Stadium this week, or at least a hat, So, all right. Enjoy it. We'll talk to you Monday. Ivy Nation Sports Talk.